Hello boys and girls, welcome to BenchART. I'm for Classic, and today what I do every night is Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne HD Remastered, a game developed by Asus, and I believe it was ported by ATL. It is using Unity engine. So I'm trying to run this game with a very old integrated graphic card called Intel HD 4400, and I will be trying to play the game at 720p both settings. So when I try to do so, I got an average of 30 frames per second with 1% of 22, but only 4% of the time the game was under 30 frames per second, so it was very playable. But if you decide to raise the resolution to my native, which is 1366 per 768, and you do use median settings, the experience will be quite contrary, overall lower than 30 frames per second. So looking to the requirements, we are below the minimums in here, because these guys require a Core 2 Duo. Now we have something better than that. We also have more than 4 gigabytes of RAM, but they ask for an Intel HD 530, which is much more powerful than an Intel HD 4400. But yet, even despite we are below the minimums in here, we are able to run the game at 30 frames per second, as you can see. Now, the issue is, the low settings, it is actually pretty bad. So this game doesn't offer too much graphical options, so you pretty much just have like resolution, VSync, the game frame rate, it is locked to 30 frames per second, but we will talk about that a little bit later. And that is just a resolution scaling option and shadows on or off. Shadows only affect the characters in this game, and rendering resolution, it is resolution scaling. So I'm playing the game basically at the low settings. I'm playing the game with no shadows, alright, and 720p using the low resolution scaling. I'm not really sure what's the value of the resolution scaling, but if I had to guess, we should be pretty much playing the game internally at 360p or probably 480p, and that's why everything looks so pixelated. But we need to think about the life and all stuff goes. So this is a GPU, an integrated GPU with 8 years old that was never conceived to play, and yet we are playing a game from 2000, a remaster from 2023, that in the end it is a game from 2003. But the good news is that we are able to play it, alright. And if you don't have any game to play in this specific GPU, now you know that you have a recent game that you can buy if you want and enjoy it, alright. But that's about it. Now let's talk a little bit about the game and the port itself, shall we? First of all, this game, it is capped to 30 frames per second. Alright, so even with VSync off, you can try everything that you want. The game, it is capped to 30 frames per second. You can't have more than that. This is completely outrageous for a PC game. For me, it's not really a big deal. I mean, cutscenes, they are fine at 30 frames per second. They look more cinematic, and even this turret-based combat at 30 frames per second, it is not a big deal. Although when traversing the map at 30 frames per second, it seems weird, you know, it seems unresponsive, and it doesn't really make any sense. Well, I do understand why this game might be locked to 30 frames per second. This game was initially released in 2003, and Japanese games and developers always loved to tie the frame rates to the game physics and behaviors. So this might be one of the games that if the frame rate was unlocked, the game would have issues, and probably that's the reason why the game, it is capped to 30 frames per second. This is a bad PC port. You barely have any graphical options. The game internal resolution, it is capped to 1080p. The game, it is capped to 30 frames per second. So I mean, this looks like a very bare bones port to the PC, and yet they charge you $50 or 50 euros for the game on Steam. This is a full price game for a game that have almost 20 years old at the moment, where the remaster barely improves anything over the original one. This is completely a cash grab. I don't have any other explanation for this. This is a super cash grab from Atlas or whatever, whatever the team or publisher that is behind this decision, this is a super cash grab. And I'm a little bit disappointed because Atlas first, when they did release Persona 4 Golden, the game was costing 20 euros. So I thought it was a nice price, a fair price, because Persona 4 it was old, and yet it is a game that have much more graphical options than Shin Megami Tensei 3. Then came Persona 5 Strikers, and since it's a new game, it made sense for me to pay for the full price for the game. But now Shin Megami Tensei, I think it is an older game than Persona 4. It is a worse port than Persona 4, and yet it costs 50 bucks. So I think they are trying to cash grab a little bit. Don't get me wrong, the game it is excellent, alright? So if you did enjoy Persona, this game, it is more of the same, aside that this game doesn't feature pretty much any social component. So it's a story about the end of the world, and you get transformed into a demon and you need to fight at the style, I mean Persona style, and you have a backstory about it, but it's not as social or teen-aging or anime style as it is in Persona. So it's a different theme. And in case you are wondering if this is a spin-off of Persona, no, that's quite the opposite. Shin Megami Tensei, it is the original games. Personas are the spin-offs. The thing is, the Persona got more famous over time than Shin Megami Tensei, and so for that reason it is easy to assume that Shin Megami Tensei it is a spin-off from Persona, but that's not really the case. Persona it is a spin-off from Shin Megami Tensei. But essentially, you know what you can expect. Even the attacks and some of the creatures are basically the same between Persona and Shin Megami Tensei. It's just the universe and the story behind it, it is completely different. There is no time of day in year like it is on Persona. So it's more focused into the story, and that's about it. And there is no teenaging and social components behind it. So regarding the game, I think the game it is awesome. Obviously it is super dated. This is a 2003 game. Remastered with small improvements. It is a super dated game, and it is super expensive, and it is a super bad port for the PC. And when I claim it is a bad port, I'm not talking about the performance. It's just really the lack of options, the 30 frames per second limits, and the lack of the ability to go above 1080p in its internal rendering resolution. Alright. So guys, I think that's all that I want to talk about Shin Megami Tensei 3. Hope you keep enjoying the rest of the video. I had to remove the music due to copyright strikes, so this might sound a little bit weird to watch this fight anyway. But that's about it. Thank you a lot for watching, and I do hope to see you soon. Goodbye.